Hello everybody, I hope you are wearing your masks, at least to protect others. And it is now roughly 4 months since the COVID pandemic has had a pretty dramatic effect on us here in the States. While I know that COVID-19 is an awful virus, there are a lot of horrible things happening, a lot of people very negatively impacted. The death toll is over 140,000 now just here in the States. This video is more along the lines of how it's affected my ultra running, and sometimes in positive ways. Back on March 13th, I was all trained and tapered, rested, packed, and ready to go to the kind of on again, off again, Buzzard Day 50K up near Cleveland, Ohio. I was coming off of, I think, 14 or 15 consecutive months of running an ultra marathon, finishing it every month, and was thinking I'd try to keep that streak going this year. About 10 minutes before I was ready to jump in my minivan and go pick up my packet, it would have been about a 3.5-hour drive. Luckily, I noticed on Facebook that they had a last-minute permit pulled. The race was canceled. So began the learning to be very flexible during the pandemic process. The next morning, I caught a ride with my wife, who was driving maybe 15 miles to her morning run group. And since I was already packed, ready to go, I grabbed my gear and ran back home via some scenic detours. I ran a 50K do-it-yourself type run, and it went really well, even though it rained and it snowed on me. I had a fantastic run, and realized I had been thinking the year prior, after all those ultras, including 600 milers, at least 3 really tough ones, I had kind of wondered if I was capable of running a 50K every weekend. And so began what ended up being 4 weekends in a row of running 50Ks, either to or from our home in Beaver Creek, Ohio. One of the runs was 50K completely on our property or the private lane that comes back to our property. So never left our yard effectively for about 8 hours. And they were all fantastic runs. I visited places in my community that I don't normally get to, and did things that I wouldn't normally get to do because of the pressure of training for and recovering from so many ultras. So those 4 50Ks in 4 back-to-back weeks, since I was effectively the race director for those races, events, whatever you want to call them, I ended up buying this goofy little beaver belt buckle as a finisher's award for these 50K runs. And I guess it was 4 weeks into it, I realized I was mostly just running the 50K each weekend. I was missing more frequent running, and decided to do one of my what I call a Romero 10-10. So that's 10 days in a row of running at least 10, but generally not more than 11 or 12 miles per day. And again, I covered a lot of destinations, trails, roads that I often don't get to see. I had a lot of fun. I'd say maybe it got a little tough on days maybe 6, 7, and 8, but started strong, finished really strong. And while I was out there, came up with an idea for a do-it-yourself 100-mile run, because my 7th annual C&O Canal 100 had to be canceled. So it was that was a special race. It was my first ever 100-miler. Had run it 6 years in a row. I was hoping to hit 10 consecutive years and be done with that at age 60. So another goal kind of knocked off course. But I was wanting to still get a 100-mile run done, and The idea was to run from our home in Beaver Creek, Ohio, out to Xenia via the bike trail that we catch at the end of our lane by our mailbox. From Xenia all the way down to Loveland on the Little Miami Scenic Trail, about 50 and a half or better miles one way, and turn back and finish it. Had never done a do-it-yourself 100-miler, had never run that. I'd only run the course one way. And several of us started the run, 2 of us completed it. And so I had a couple of custom buckles printed for about 20 bucks a piece as mementos, trinkets for a run that I really treated it like a 100-mile race. We had one other local runner whose husband crewed us the entire 26 and a half hours of running plus the extra time. So we had an extra buckle made for him as well. Several runners joined in for bits and pieces, parts of the run. We raised over $1,400 via Facebook fundraiser for the local food bank. So that was a real win-win, pleasant surprise. How relatively convenient it was to get quite a few people to donate. While I was out talking to some other runners during that first do-it-yourself 100-mile run, it was Mother's Day weekend. It was actually the weekend polar vortex came back as a popular phrase on the Weather Channel. It was cold for Mother's Day. Anyhow, got down to Loveland, turned back, and realized how cool it would have been to not turn around and repeat anything. I kind of had this idea that maybe some year I would just run from the house and just keep going past Loveland, all the way out of Ohio, through Cincinnati into Kentucky, and just have my wife or whomever come pick me up. And so 4 weeks after the Beaver Creek Loveland 100-mile run, I actually had an opportunity to do just that, which was only 3 weeks before the Canal Corridor 100-mile race, which ended up being one of the first races in the U.S. since March, 100-mile races, to not be canceled. 3 weeks after the do-it-yourself 100-miler, I was out running on a Saturday morning and was trying to think of a better sign for a protest or rally that I was going to with my family. And I like to keep it positive instead of thinking of that as a protest. More in line with the thinking of, say, Gandhi or Mother Teresa. Want to be more of a rally for something positive. Focus on what you want, not what you don't want. So I came up with Rally for Justice, and then of course we get all kinds of crazy ideas while we're out having a nice run, and I thought, I wonder if I could do a Run for Justice and try to make it another fundraiser. And then I thought about that idea of running to Kentucky, and before the run was over, I pretty much had it all mapped out and in my head was going to do this thing. But I was sort of afraid to even bring it up because just, a few weeks before, quite a few people had donated already. I'd asked for the money. People came out and helped. They gave up their time and energy. It just seemed awful soon to be asking for more favors. But due to the pandemic, people were available and looking for something positive to contribute to. So I started fine-tuning the plan, and then we went to this protest. It just so happened that the speaker there did a fantastic job of talking about social justice and, suggesting, well, being out there and marching is showing some leadership. What are you going to really do beyond that? And I already had the plan. I already come up with it that very morning. But after the protest rally, response to the concept was lukewarm. Just wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get enough support to actually be able to pull it off. Then the very next morning, I got a kind of a random message from Helen, who been the other runner at the 100-mile race 3 weeks prior. She was looking to see if I was interested in having her husband crew us to run the 50-mile route from Beaver Creek to Loveland again. And of course, I had to smile and then message back that, hey, you know, what's another 50? Let's just do 100, and here's what I'm thinking. And we ended up pulling my wife in to crew, and my daughter, to crew from like 75 to 100 miles, and then fine-tune the plan. I decided I wanted to run the entire Little Miami Scenic Trail. I've never even ridden the entire trail on a bike, much less run it. So that's about 78 miles. We started about 6 a.m. the next Saturday in Springfield, Ohio, north and east of where we live. We ran that entire distance, ended up near an airport, basically east of Cincinnati, and took roads, trails, paths to Cincinnati, climbed up Mount Adams, and had a beautiful view from the vantage point on the top of Mount Adams of the bridge, of some of the bridges we were going to be running over after that into Kentucky. Backing up just a little bit on this, watching 60 Minutes that weekend prior, they had interviewed the leader for the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. Needless to say, I was very impressed, did a little bit of research, and figured that would be an ideal organization to raise funds for. So that was going to be the idea. Try to see how many friends would donate to the NAACP. We were going to run a relatively epic 100-mile route, and a fellow ultra runner from Cincinnati, a lot of people know him, Harvey Lewis, saw what I was doing on Facebook and recommended that we end our run at the Freedom Center, which is actually the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. And there's a bridge from Kentucky over to Cincinnati. Or the original bridge there was built after the Civil War, and it was considered the Freedom Bridge. When the slaves left Kentucky, got on that bridge, crossed over to Ohio, that was freedom. And that ended up being the perfect way to end what was a very successful fundraiser. We had 55 donations, over 50 individuals donated $1,860. So a couple of do-it-yourself runs, and we raised over $3,000 for very timely causes. The runs were fantastic. I had never been able to say that I did 2 100-mile training runs for an official race that was coming up in just 3 weeks. The Freedom Center has a flame that's always burning on top of it. So that really caught my eye and inspired the design of this buckle. So 2 of us got this. My daughter designed it, and the flame from the Freedom Center ended up being the focal point of the design. And due to protests and some rioting and violence that was happening during the George Floyd protests, it was just a few days before our night run through Cincinnati that the curfews were listed. And I really only had that weekend to pull off this whole thing. Because again, it was only going to be 3 weeks until this race, which obviously was not canceled because I earned the buckle. My third time running a home state 100-miler. So this is the only race in Ohio that I've completed. The race directors were not going to take no for an answer. They came up with new procedures that looked like a medical team had put it together. So there were quite a few modifications to the typical 100-mile ultra, and they were great. It wasn't exactly like a typical 100-miler, obviously, but it was just wonderful to be out there running a real race, seeing new things, meeting runners from all over the country, and no need to go have custom buckles printed. So this whole COVID situation obviously sucks. There's no end in sight yet, obviously. Running has been a very important part of my coping with the situation. I've actually probably run more this year because of it. And for a while there, during lockdown, I was running on busy streets with no traffic, and things were really different. Life slowed down so much. I think I even noticed wildlife behaving differently. It was an interesting time to kind of go more within and just kind of get more in tune, to do more meditation and just kind of get tuned in with nature and ourselves. So as always, but especially now, I highly recommend people try to move healthy, try to get back to running, eating healthy foods, which obviously I recommend mostly whole plant-based foods, and get your rest, but get out there and exercise. Living with ease versus dis-ease can take a lot of effort, but it's definitely worth it. And one final comment, I did run all 3 of these recent 100-mile runs within about 9 weeks, exclusively in Xero shoes. But what was unique about the Canal Corridor 100 for me, which was really more like 102 miles, I ran the entire things in the sports sandal called the Xero. But what's most relevant about that was I didn't have to wear socks. I didn't have any problems, no blisters, no chafing. But this was the lightest footwear for an entire 100-mile run that I've ever been able to get away with. So I guess one more unintended positive consequence of the pandemic was trying to develop more as a minimalist runner.